Rejection can feel like the ultimate heartbreak, like a punch to the gut that takes the wind right out of you. You set your heart on something, a job, a relationship, a dream, and just when you think it's yours, the door slams shut. It's easy to feel defeated, to start questioning yourself, wondering what you did wrong or why it didn't work out. But what if I told you that rejection isn't the end of the road? It's just a divine detour. What if I told you that every no you've ever received was actually God redirecting you to a better yes? See, we get so caught up in our own plans that we forget God sees the whole picture. We see a door closing and assume it's a loss, but God knows it's a setup for something greater. You weren't meant to stay in that relationship that fell apart. You weren't meant to get that job that turned you down. You weren't meant to walk through that door because it was never yours to begin with. God is saying, I got something better for you, but you got to trust me enough to move on. Think about how many times you wanted something so badly, but later when you looked back, you realized that if you had gotten it, it would have limited you. It would have trapped you in a place you weren't supposed to be. That business deal you lost, that friendship that ended, that opportunity that slipped through your fingers, it wasn't rejection, it was protection. God saw what was on the other side of that door, and he knew it wasn't for you. But the problem is, we fight against rejection. We try to hold on to what's leaving. We beg God to reopen doors he's already shut. And in doing that, we miss what he's trying to do in our lives. Instead of crying over what didn't happen, we need to start asking, Lord, where are you taking me instead? Because when one door closes, that's your cue to start looking for the next one. And trust me, when God opens a door for you, no man can shut it. So don't see rejection as failure, see it as divine redirection. When God says no, it's because he's already lined up a better yes. And when that yes comes, you'll understand why the old doors had to close. Waiting is one of the hardest things to do, especially when you feel like you've been putting in the work, saying the right prayers, doing everything you're supposed to do, and yet nothing seems to be happening. You see other people getting their breakthroughs, stepping into their blessings, and you start wondering, God, did you forget about me? But let me tell you something. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Delay is not denial. It's preparation. It's positioning. It's God working behind the scenes, setting things up for you in ways you can't even imagine. See, we live in a world where everything is instant. We want success overnight. We want prayers answered on our timeline. We want the blessing without the process. But God doesn't operate on human timing. His ways are higher, his plans are bigger, and sometimes he makes us wait, not to punish us, but to prepare us. Because if he gave you what you're asking for too soon, you might not be ready to handle it. The weight of the blessing would crush you instead of elevate you. Think about a seed planted in the ground. You don't see anything happening at first. Days go by, weeks, sometimes even months, and there's no sign of life. But under the surface, roots are growing, foundations are being built, and when the time is right, that seed breaks through the soil. That's how God works. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean nothing is happening. Just because your situation looks the same doesn't mean God isn't moving. He's strengthening you, molding you, growing you into the person who can handle what's coming next. But here's where a lot of people miss their blessing. They get tired of waiting and give up too soon. They stop praying. They stop believing. They walk away just before their breakthrough. What if I told you that the very thing you've been waiting for is right around the corner? That the delay wasn't to discourage you, but to develop you. God didn't say no, he just said not yet. And when the time is right, when you've learned what you needed to learn, when you've grown into the person you need to be, the door will open. And when it does, you'll realize that the wait was worth it. So Don't get discouraged in the delay. Keep believing, keep pushing, keep preparing, because when God finally releases what he has for you, it's going to be bigger and better than anything you imagine. And you'll look back and thank him for making you wait. Life has a way of knocking you down when you least expect it. You put in the effort, you make the sacrifices, you give it everything you've got, and then, boom, life hits you with a setback. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe a relationship ended. Maybe you took a risk and failed. And in that moment, it feels like everything you worked for is slipping through your fingers. You start wondering, why me? Why now? What did I do to deserve this? But what if I told you that your setback wasn't meant to break you? What if I told you that what feels like a loss is actually a setup for something greater? See, we get so focused on what went wrong that we don't realize God is still working. When you experience a setback, it doesn't mean your story is over. It doesn't mean you're finished. It means God is positioning you for a comeback that's bigger than anything you could have planned for yourself. Sometimes he allows things to fall apart so he can rebuild them the right way. That job you lost, that relationship that didn't work out, that dream that seemed to slip away, God saw what you couldn't see. He knew that staying in that place would limit you, so he allowed the setback not to punish you, but to push you. Think about the greatest success stories. They're never smooth, easy paths. Every person who has achieved something incredible has faced setbacks, big ones. They've been told no, they've been knocked down, they've lost everything. But the difference between those who rise again and those who stay down is one thing: perspective. The ones who rise understand that a setback is just a setup. They don't see failure as final, they see it as fuel. They take the lessons, they adjust their mindset, and they use that struggle to push them forward. Now, you might be in the middle of your setback right now. You might be looking at your life thinking, I don't see how I come back from this. But let me tell you something. This is not where your story ends. This is the chapter before the breakthrough. And if you keep your faith, if you refuse to give up, if you trust that God is still in control, you will come back stronger. You will come back wiser. You will come back with a testimony that will inspire others. So don't let the setback define you, let it refine you. Because the greater the setback, the greater the comeback. And when you step into that comeback, you'll understand that everything you went through was necessary to get you to where you were always meant to be. God never promised that the journey would be easy, but he did promise that he would never leave you. The delays, the struggles, the unanswered prayers, they're not signs that God has forgotten about you. They're signs that he's building something bigger than you can see right now. Frustration will tell you to give up, but faith will tell you to hold on just a little bit longer. Frustration will make you focus on what's wrong, but faith will remind you that God is still in control. Think about all the times you felt stuck in the past, the times you thought you wouldn't make it, but somehow, some way, you did. That wasn't luck. That was faith in action. That was God working behind the scenes, moving pieces into place, even when you couldn't see it. And if he did it before, he'll do it again, but you've got to trust him, even in the silence. You've got to believe that the waiting isn't wasted, that the struggle isn't pointless, that the blessing is still on the way. So the next time frustration knocks on your door, answer it with faith. Instead of complaining about what hasn't happened, start declaring what's about to happen. Instead of focusing on what's going wrong, start believing that something is about to go right. Because when you choose faith over frustration, you give God room to do what only He can do. And when He moves, it won't just be good, it'll be greater than anything you imagine. Everybody wants the blessing, but not everybody is ready for it. We pray for elevation, for success, for bigger opportunities, but what we don't always realize is that God doesn't take us to the next level until we're prepared to handle it. He's not going to put you in a position that you're not equipped for. He's not going to give you something that will crush you instead of bless you. So when it feels like you're stuck, when it seems like the door isn't opening, don't get discouraged, get prepared. Because before God elevates you, He always takes you through a season of preparation. Preparation is where the real work happens. It's where your character is developed, where your patience is tested, where your faith is stretched. It's the behind-the-scenes grind that nobody sees. The lonely nights, the sacrifices, the lessons that seem hard in the moment, but are necessary for where you're going. See, you don't build strength when everything is easy. You build strength when you have to push through obstacles, when you have to keep believing, even when there's no evidence of a breakthrough. Look at every great person who has ever achieved something meaningful. They didn't just wake up one day and step into success. They had to go through the process. They had to learn. They had to fail. They had to be tested. David was anointed as king, but he didn't step into his throne the next day. He had to go through years of trials before he was ready. Joseph had a dream of greatness, but before he got to the palace, he had to go through the pit and the prison. Why? Because if God had given them the elevation before they were ready, they wouldn't have been able to sustain it. And the same applies to you. You might be in a season of waiting, a season where it feels like nothing is happening. But trust me, God is working. He's refining you. He's teaching you discipline, patience, humility, and resilience. He's putting you through situations that might not feel good right now, but they're necessary for your growth. Because when the opportunity comes, you won't have time to prepare. You'll have to be ready. So instead of asking, why is it taking so long, start asking, what do I need to learn in this season? Instead of getting frustrated with the process, embrace it. Because when God sees that you're ready, when He knows that you have the wisdom, the strength, and the faith to handle the next level, He will open doors that no man can shut. And when that elevation comes, you'll realize that every struggle, every delay, and every challenge was just preparing you for something greater than you ever imagined. See, we have a limited view of life. We see what's in front of us, and when something is taken away, we assume that's all there was. But God sees the full picture. He knows what's coming next. He knows that what you thought was your best was actually just the beginning. That setback wasn't a loss, it was a setup. That delay wasn't a denial, it was preparation. That disappointment wasn't rejection, it was because when God takes something away, He's not trying to hurt you. He's making room for something greater. Think about the times in your life when you wanted something so badly, only to later realize that if you had gotten it, it wouldn't have been what you needed. Maybe you prayed for a relationship to work out, but years later you saw that person's true colors, and thank God for not letting you settle. Maybe you fought for a job that rejected you, but then a better opportunity came along that you never saw coming. That's how God works. He doesn't just bless you with what you think you need. He blesses you with what He knows is best for you.